We'll now call this meeting to order. I'll ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll.
A special session is being held on Thursday, May 15, 2014, at 5 o'clock p.m. in the Commission Chambers for an installation ceremony for Doug Bach, County Administrator, immediately followed by the discussion on CDBG. Immediately following at 7 o'clock p.m. Commission meeting and executive session will be held in the 9th floor conference room regarding litigation. Roll call. Kane. Markley. Walters. Philbrook.
Here.
Walker. Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia. Here. Maddox.
Here.
Holland.
Here. And again, I want to reiterate, we thank Commissioner Townsend for being present by phone. We are going to begin tonight. Tonight we have a special installation ceremony for our new Unified Government County Administrator, Doug Bach. And as we begin, we're going to ask for the invocation from his aunt, Sister Mary Ann Dice, OSB from Mount St. Scholastica. Thank you for being here, and if you would step to the microphone and offer our invocation, we would appreciate it. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, we ask your blessing on this meeting tonight. We ask your blessing especially on Doug and all the deliberations that need to be made in this county. We ask this in your name through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much, and please be seated. As we were planning this installation ceremony, we did not have the privilege of going back to see how the unified government has installed an administrator before, because we never have. So we've had the same administrator for the last 17 years, and so it is a joy and a privilege to be able to have a presentation for Doug Bach. We went through, as you know, Dennis Hayes announced his retirement. With a year window, we went through a national search. And I am pleased to say that as Doug Bach came forward, that we received a unanimous vote from this commission, which is an endorsement for you and for your leadership in our community, recognizing more than 20 years of leadership in our community, as well as 12 as a deputy administrator. I want to welcome tonight also Doug's wife Martha, sons Alex and Ryan. Ethan is not here yet. On his way from Manhattan. So, and what's he doing in Manhattan? I'm sorry.
We want to find out.
That's what we want to find out. See what happened this first year of school. So, that's great. Well, it is my distinct honor to congratulate Doug Bach tonight, and I believe we have a presentation for you from some items from myself and the commission that will help you with the task ahead. All right, first, since this is coming up in July, we have a budget book, operating budget. Look how great that is, a 3-inch binder. We'll give that to you. We have a strategic plan that the Commission's been working on for 2 years now, so we want you to implement all of that. And then we have a community survey, and so we want you to make all of this come true and do it within budget by July 10th. So, and I will just share the same lesson I learned upon becoming mayor. Be careful what you wish for. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Bach. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, in coming into an installation ceremony, I will say I'm glad to see Chief Duke over here, because Chief Jones informed me that the last time he had been to an installation was when he had a new furnace put in his house. So we'll see how that works now. They're going to hook me up in a little bit. Thank you, Mayor and Commission, for having the confidence to make me your new county administrator. Our county has experienced unprecedented growth over the last 15 years, and I know as I was going through the interview process, you all indicated that that's good. You expect to see that growth continue, but not just in the areas we've been doing it. Let's continue it and let's get it all over the community. So thank you for that vote of confidence, and I look forward to that. I also want to thank the community, both our citizens and the commercial sector, for your support. I went through an application assessment center, and people were coming up to me and giving me encouragement all the time as I went through it. I can probably reach out to hundreds of different people that made that voice and such like that and patted me on the back as I went through. So thank you to all of you, and it's really my pleasure to look forward to serving all of you. I'm in a position to make our government work better and more effectively and even more efficiently for you as elected leaders and for the citizens of our community. And I'm in a position to make the unified government work that way, and I will do it. To the many employees who encouraged me throughout the past year, you are the ones who make our government operate. Ours is a profession of service to the public, and through your hard work, dedication, creativity, you're able to serve our citizens and advance our community, despite many times the limited resources that we have to work with. Thank you for your hard work, and I look forward to counting on you as we move forward. I know I can count on you as we move forward. And most of all, I'd like to thank my family, my wife Martha, Ethan, who's not here, Alex and Ryan. I can clearly say that it was only with my wife's support and really what she had to give up sometimes on her own professional level and what she was not able to do that allowed me to really dedicate myself professionally over the years and commit myself to this organization for many hours and a lot of things that put me in a position so I could advance today. So with that, I say to Martha, thank you for being there with me through all the tough times, and I look forward to the years to come. I know I can always count on you to be there with me. And boys, you always make the world a better place for me. You know, many times. You know, usually it's through a hard day of work, different things come up. It may be some of the distractions of your games or such events or activities that are going on, but you always put it on into perspective to me when I get home that what's really important in life. As I begin my new career as the county administrator for the unified government, I'm excited about the many areas for which we can advance. One of the areas that will be my focus will be in the neighborhoods. Much like our employees are the force behind our government, I really look at our neighborhoods as a part of our community that really make our cities great places to live. Neighborhoods are a priority, and that focus will improve the quality of life for everyone who makes Wyandotte County their home. Our neighborhood groups are very active, and we have engaged them in meaningful ways, but we must find ways to empower them in order to see their efforts continue to expand. We have good incentive tools for housing, but we can do more. As the largest employer of residents within Wyandotte County, we must find our way to make our workforce more engaged as citizens and encourage living situations in our urban areas. The future of Wyandotte County is bright, and our community is one which has faced serious challenges and rebuilt itself. We have become the tourism capital of Kansas and our region. We have become an economic engine which keeps Kansas' economy running, and I am asked regularly, how does Wyandotte County continue with all these successes? The answer is simple. Citizens that are committed to their community and elected leaders who are dedicated to improving the quality of life from north to south and east to west. Some of the successes we've had in Village West is starting to make it possible for the unified government to invest in our neighborhoods across the city. We have new grocery stores, more sidewalks, improved streets, improved transit, and new and expanding business, which has generated more than almost $1 billion in new development that came into our community last year. And we're not done with that. We have new plans, additional things that are coming all the way to our downtown with our commitment to the healthy campus and along Minnesota Avenue and future plans for our Indian Springs area. Yes, we're going to face budget and financial challenges as we move forward, but that won't stop us. We'll figure it out and work through it because we have a very talented team of employees, thoughtful and direction from our mayor and commission, and committed to community partners. I'm honored and privileged to be serving as your county administrator. Mayor Holland, commissioners, thank you for having the confidence to move me into this position and trust me to lead this great organization. I won't let you down.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bach. We're welcome and appreciate your work. And we are going to move now, as we always do, from the ceremonial portions into the actual work of the government, because we have a budget coming up and we have a work session yet. So I can't think of any way to punctuate an excellent installation ceremony but with a discussion on community development block grant funding. And that's where we're headed now. So I want to thank everyone who came for this. It was a nice reception as well. Martha and kids, it was good to see you. Have a great evening. We'll take a few minutes as the group exits and ask the staff to prepare for our next step for our meeting tonight. Go ahead and begin our workshop on CDBG. I will say that we are looking forward to the installation of our new camera system on the 5th floor, so we can have these conversations in a workshop format rather than up here. And the only reason on Thursday nights that our special sessions need to be down here is because between 5 and 7 when we end, there's not enough time to move the camera equipment downstairs. So once we have the new equipment installed, we'll have our own cameras in the 5th floor and in this room also, so we can do our special sessions there and then come down here for our 7 o'clock commission meetings. So we're winding down on these, but we do want to move forward with our CDBG. And I do understand we need to, we do have, Wilba Miller is sick tonight, and we want to keep her in our thoughts as she's recovering, and she's sorry she's not able to be here. She made an offer to be available by phone, but if you're sick, I think you should just stay in bed. So anyway, so we have her team here who's going to be working with us tonight. Mr. Bach?
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. Yeah, tonight we're excited to get into the community development budget. Tonight, really, we're taking this from a framework to kind of step back a little bit, look at the historical perspective of where we've been with CDBG funding over the past 5 years, so we have a good feel from where we are there. And then I know the Commission, as we've talked about this in our workshops, I wanted to get a good understanding of what our flexibilities are, what our options are to get into maybe if we want to go in a different direction than where we've been over the past many years and probably since we've had community development. And we know that that's been an area that has had a decreasing amount of money that's been allocated to us for years, stepping back year after year as the federal government has cut back on it. But it is still a sizable amount of money that comes into our community, and we want to put that focus. So tonight is really to kind of set it up, give a good understanding of where we've been with it, make sure the Commission has a good understanding of what our options are, and then look forward to 2014. We're not necessarily saying we're going to build a budget for 2014. It's more of one of saying this is how much money we're anticipating to be allocated, and we'll come back in a separate workshop where we actually would sit down and kind of put those dollars into the different areas that you all are suggesting we go forward. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Gordon Criswell, our Assistant County Administrator, and Stephanie Moore with Community Development for the presentation tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, and newly installed County Administrator, Doug. I'm going to offer you guys a brief presentation on the Community Development block grants budget process. And we were working on this just a few hours ago, so you probably just received it in your email. So this presentation will include the following items up there: the national objectives, the eligibility map, and some accomplishments over the last 5 years. So here's the eligibility hierarchy. If you choose to do one of your activities, it must fall within the low mod, slumber blight, and urgent need is more of a presidential call if there's a natural disaster. So the low mod and slum blight are the top two that we have our activities fall under. And the census tract map is based on the 2010 census, and it's kind of hard to see with the lighting, but the yellow census tracts are considered low mod by HUD. And that is, a lot of our activities fall into those low mod census tracts. And I'm going to show you guys the historical maps of these programs. This is the CDBG home repair and barrier removal. And barrier removal is for accessibility, if it's a ramp or grab bars. And those families have to be income eligible to receive assistance. So that's the scatter map over the last 5 years. We've done 39 barriers and 650 home repairs. And some of those could be a home repair and a barrier. And at the bottom there, it's 2.7 million has been expended on those activities. These are the special projects that have been taken place from 09 to 13. And that's 613,000 expended. And this is the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant, which was through the Department of Energy and the Health Department. And that was from 2009 to 13. And there were 64 homes and $270,000 expended for weatherization. This is our CHIP program, which is a down payment assistance program to make affordable housing for folks who are income eligible. And there were 87 homes and 1.6 million expended. And this next slide is our home CHODOs. So that's our housing partners, also including Habitat for Humanity. And there were 29 new, and we also do rehab. So there was 10 rehab, and those are sold to income eligible buyers. NSP 1 has been closed out, but we had 52 units, and I put the entire allocation on there, 5.6 million. NSP 3 is still active. We had 26 units under that program. 5 have sold, we have 1 pending sale, and 12 under contract. And the federal and state allocation is 5.9 million. And then here's the historical from 2010 to 14, what we've gotten in our allocation directly from HUD. You can see our CDBG everything pretty much has gone down, and overall a 15% reduction in funds. And in that same time frame, we've had a 27% reduction in staff due to retirements. And this is the HUD supportive housing, and that's through the COC, the Continuum of Care, and they're an umbrella for these agencies you see on the left for Hillcrest, Friends of Yates, Mount Carmel. They're under that umbrella, and they apply directly to HUD for these funds and are awarded directly. And then community development oversees those grants, processes payments, and provides monitoring. So I wanted to bring this page to you guys. This is pretty important. You might remember this from last year. You approved this budget, and those are the breakdowns in the CDBG categories. And the total, except for home and ESG, that's something we do department level, but those CDBG breakouts are what we need to address for this next action plan, this next budget round. So you'll see on that top right, we have 2.7 that we need your guys' help budgeting. So I wanted to let you guys know what, so you'll have a matrix in front of you. Get your microscope out and you can see these separate matrix codes. So I didn't put that in the slides because it's very small to read. So for an example, if you wanted to do street improvements, first you would check your hierarchy and find that it's a low mod benefit. Then you would check your matrix code and you would see that it's 3K, and you'd walk over and see if there's no N, that means yes, you can do it under these objective codes. And on the back, you'll see the breakdown of what all those acronyms mean. So you'd see it's 3K, and can it be used? And you would see yes, it could. And then it would reference you back to your statutory regulations. So you'd have to do additional research because CDBG is a complex program to administer and stay within the HUD regulations. So then you can also check your census tract map. If it falls within that census tract, then you can definitely do that as a low mod area benefit. And if you don't get the low mod area benefit, you can use it to ask it if it creates low mod jobs. And so that's why I wanted to put you guys on that last section right there. It says you can use it as an option to adopt in our next budget. So if there's something you see that we're not doing that maybe your goals are directing you to, that's something we can look at if it's within our budget, that $2.9 million budget that we need to allocate. And that was my brief presentation. Do you have anything, Gordon?
I'd just like to reiterate, Mayor and Commissioners and Mr. Bach, that you all know that community development of all of the departments in this massive organization, it is the most audited, the most regulated. I will say from a personal standpoint that when I was appointed assistant administrator, we were dealing with a number of HUD audit findings, and I went to the community development department and basically said, we're too smart, we have too many lawyers on our staff to be having audit findings. Audit findings are not acceptable, and we have been moving in that vein ever since. Say a little bit more about the matrix. It is one of the most complex documents that I've ever seen in terms of trying to figure out what is eligible under the HUD rules and regulations that would allow you all and staff to initiate projects without HUD coming back and saying you have an audit exception. I personally didn't want to go to the administrator and say, we have an audit exception. I don't think that would sit very well with the administrator. So we take great pains and patience and deliverance when we have a project. We make sure that we have dotted every I and crossed every T in the hopes that when the monitors come, they will find a department that is well attuned to the many, many regulations and exceptions to the regulations, such that we don't have audit findings. Because sometimes audit findings means we have to come to the governing body and say we have to pay money back. We're not in position to pay money back to anybody. So I just want to reiterate that. And I'd like to say to Stephanie, she was a bit nervous this evening. She's one of our up-and-coming young managers, and this was a great opportunity for her to get in front of you all, make presentation, because you're looking at your future managers right here, and you did a great job.
Well, thank you.
Very good. Any questions for either of us?
All right.
I'm sure.
Mr. Bach?
I think in laying this out, and Stephanie, I think you had the one graph. Why don't we go back to the one that shows the 13, 14?
This
Yeah. So probably as we hit to this point, you know, the objective here was, so you were all thinking about different areas of funding, and Gordon did a good job of cautioning us all on the audit aspects of it. But this kind of goes down to the different areas that we spent the money in last year. And I know that's been the feedback that I've received from all of you, that we want to get into some different areas. And I appreciate, you know, Stephanie using the street example, because that's the number one item on your survey. So it comes up number one, and we're not spending a dime on it, on our CDBG money. Well, maybe it's something we need to think about, and it's an area we want to get into. So this is the chart that over the next few weeks we'd like to fill out. And, you know, it can still have some changes made to it as you go into the final budget, but we have to go through and fill it out, and then we advertise it and post it in order for it to be adopted toward the end of July with the rest of our budget. So that's where the timeliness is now, what we're working on, and why we try to get a pretty good framework in mind over the next couple of weeks as to what we will be putting in these different areas. So information's out there for you to think about. If you have other questions tonight, or you want to get some things on there on the agenda for us to start working on, it's a great time.
Just one other point. We are required to do what's called a 5-year action plan under our regulations, and we are in the 4th year of our 5th year of the governing body's approved 5-year action plan. So really now is the perfect time to be planning your next 5-year action plan, because we are in the process of trying to figure out what we bring back to the governing body in the way of a 5-year action plan. That really becomes the department's roadmap of how the governing body wants us to allocate and spend the resources that we get from HUD. So as the administrator said, now's the time to be thinking about that 14-15 budget in terms of the priorities that you all think that we should be devoting our limited resources to. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to open it up to the commission. Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you. Can you pull back up the map that had the red dots on them?
There's several. Do you remember which one?
I don't, and I don't have it. I didn't get this by email, or I didn't get a hard copy as well. And I wanted to know what exactly is that an illustration of?
Those are every house that we have assisted with home repair, and which is paid out of CDBG. So low to moderate income households come to our office seeking assistance for systems failures, anything that's a hazard, like a roof or a foundation or electrical or a water, like a backed up sewer.
Okay, so those are the homes that receive service through the emergency home
Right,
grant?
they come to our department seeking assistance.
Okay. And my question and concern is is that when you say low-mod-income individuals, that's an important term for me because I know a lot of my district is represented by that. So I know there's a committee that has formed, you know, to pull in the actual presentations, look over them, and come up with the criteria. But I'm hopeful that, you know, that's been taken into account, that where low-mod income individuals are heavily concentrated, that those services are looked at for what may be needed for those individuals. And I also would like to see us take a different approach in the future as a whole CDBG unit. I think we get the best bang for our buck with CDBG funds when we look in those areas where low-mod income individuals are concentrated and see what services they need most. Be it you look at the survey, be it, you know, we look at, you know, the different requests from the past, but those low-mod income individuals, if that money is to go in those areas, then we take a precise look into what may be needed in those areas. So I know in the future, what we've done in the past is we say, bring in proposals for funding. And then we say, okay, we like this proposal, we like that proposal, that's a good program, let's fund it. Well, I'm saying in the future, where those low-mod income individuals are concentrated, that we come up with something to get the best outcome by putting the funding together to present a service or two that has the best bang for our buck. And so that's just something I'm putting out there on the table, is that in the future, maybe not just take in different proposals from everywhere and say, okay, we'll fund it, but look in those areas where low-mod income individuals are concentrated and put services out there that are needed. So.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Murguia.
Thank you, Mayor. I just kind of want to build on what Commissioner Maddox said. Before I do that, I have one little question for staff. How much interaction does community development have with Wyandotte County economic development?
Limited action, limited interactions.
Okay, that's what I suspected. And so I just have a suggestion. Obviously, it can't be done tonight or maybe anytime soon, but I'd like to see us consider maybe moving community development in with Wyandotte economic development. And I think this speaks to exactly what Commissioner Maddox is talking about. This amount of money that we receive in CDBG and home dollars is a very small amount of money in the scheme of things. And truly, to begin to transform a neighborhood, you're going to need more than these dollars. Okay, so I think if we do what Commissioner Maddox said and we focus those dollars in those low to mod areas, but we leverage those with fair market economic development dollars, I think we would get a lot more bang for our buck. And I'm disappointed that Greg Kindle and Wyandotte Economic Development are not more involved with this department and haven't been historically. It doesn't mean we can't change. I think it's always been like there's economic development for some areas of our cities and not for others because it's more difficult. But I think this money can entice fair market developers to come to areas where they traditionally haven't come in the past. And I think it could be very efficient and have a lot more impact than we've had in the past. It's just a suggestion.
Thank you. Commissioner Philbrook.
First off, I'd like to say that I have to take exception with part of the last comment that Commissioner Murguia made, and that is that the assumption that Wyandotte development does not pay attention to the inner city, because that's not true. The economic development people do pay attention to the inner city. So that being said, I have some technical questions to ask you. Number one, what would be a low-mod area benefit community development financial institution? Somebody just supports, like it used to be City Vision or something like that that dissolved, or what are we talking?
Is that one of the things on your grid?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's one of the different sections. I was just trying to understand what some of these are. So I guess I'm probably going to have to make an appointment with you so you guys can tell me what some of these things are so I know what my latitudes are.
Yes, please, because I have no idea what that is.
I'm feeling better already. Thank you very much, Gordon. That's enough. Thank
Commissioner Markley.
Thanks, Mayor. So earlier this year, I and Commissioner Murguia and Brian McKiernan also went to training, but it was a different one, so he can speak to whether that was about CDBG. But Commissioner Murguia and I went to a training on CDBG, and I have a great notebook, Jane, that if you want to look at it, it's in my office, and it has all kinds of great information and a chart of acronyms. So, yes, you're welcome to it. So, you know, the training was really great, and it went through all of these details and kind of gave us an idea of what our department deals with when people come to them with requests. But one thing that was frustrating about the training is that the other communities represented in the training were doing some of the things that we have dreamed of doing with our dollars and have been told it was not possible. So, you know, we were frustrated coming back and thinking, well, we've asked for all these things and we've been told you can't do it because of this and you can't do it because of that, but it was clearly happening in other places. I think, you know, that might be for a number of reasons. You know, it could be that were actually some sort of limitations that were preventing that. I think some of it might be that because of audit returns, maybe we're a little more scared than other communities to sort of stretch the law and try to do things that maybe haven't been done before. But I feel like we just spend these dollars, and we spend them, and they get spent out there, and they help people, and that's great, but we spend them in a way that isn't for the maximum benefit. We've been doing it that way for years, I think, in my opinion, and every year, since I've been on the commission at least, the commission has sat up here and said, we want to do something different, we want to do something bigger, we want to spend these dollars in a different way, we want to be more focused about it, and still today, there is no significant change in how we're spending this money. So to the commissioners, I would just say, please, let's actually move forward. We all want to do something different. We've been talking about it for years. We need to make some actual decisions about how we're going to change the way that we spend this money to make greater benefit for our community. And if that involves putting it under economic development or WIDEC, I'm great with that. I think it's a fabulous idea. We've been saying we want to spend more money on economic development out of this pot, so that works for me. If it's something else altogether, you know, we have this Sidewalk and Trails Master Plan with their whole process to come up with all of these priority areas for sidewalk development. And every year we talk about sidewalks in CDBG and we say, no, that can't be done. Other communities are doing it. If we're going to have a master plan, it'd be nice if we actually used it. So I'd love to see us take that priority list, find the ones that are in low mod areas, and start doing some every year with these dollars. We need to step off our little island here and get moving. Every year we say we're going to do something. It's time to do it. Let's figure out what we want to spend this money on, and let's start crafting a policy that gives this department some direction so that next year we're not sitting here having the same conversation saying we could spend this money for something great and not doing anything about it.
Thank you. I would ask if we could go to nearly the last slide where you show the funding over the last 4 years. That one. If we look on the right-hand column, that's our 2014 allocation. CDBG is $2 million. The ESG is $172,000. Home allocation is $64,000. 560. I thought that was a dollar sign. I guess I need reading and far reading glasses. If you would give me a breakdown, if we look at, and then I think that's a good idea of the 3 buckets of money we have. If you go to the next slide, it shows how we, one more, that one, and it shows how we spend the money, and I think this is important. Our energy solution, our ESG grants are for homeless assistance and administration. How much in terms of just breaking down the dollars, how much flexibility do we have on the emergency solutions grant in terms of the ways we can spend that money?
That's by a separate statute. So ESG has its own regs, and so they do allow 7% for admin that ESG administration, and then the rest goes to homeless. And that's parceled out through an RFP process we're going through right now.
So if we wanted to not spend the money on homeless, we couldn't take this money with us.
No, you cannot, the home and the ESG are their own funding pools.
Right.
So I do see I've made a typo on this slide. The actual amount to be budgeted is $2,056,662. I put that 2.7, that's all of them together. So CDBG is only 2 million.
Right.
So,
So if we go to the ESG, there's not, just
no
so we know what money
flexibility.
we can be creative with. ESG isn't at home. What are the restrictions on the home dollars, just as a
there's
reminder?
a minimum set aside for admin that goes to our department, and then 15% minimum for the CHODOs has to go to the CHODOs. And then the rest is opened up. We can allocate that as we see fit through our entitlement process.
So what kind of things can we use the home dollars for?
It has to be home related. It cannot go to infrastructure. So
Yes.
it has to end in a home unit.
Okay,
So
so it can't go
anything-
to a business,
No, it
Or
is
a business corridor.
exclusively, no, it's exclusively for well, it ends in a owner-occupied unit.
right? So we can use that for a CHIP loan program, but we
Yes.
don't have to do it. There's no set aside required for loan programs?
No, there's not.
And is there a set aside, we set aside the amount for the CHODOs, but we determine that amount?
It has to be 15% of your allocation.
15% has to go to CHODOs?
Those.
Okay,
And 10% minimum to the admin.
okay. So of the $556,000 we get from home,
So that 10% you can see is already out there, and then the CHODO is probably a little higher, but we've exceeded our threshold every year.
so almost half of the money for the home is allocated by rule.
The minimum, yeah, the rules.
So what we can do, we could do the new construction and rehab, that $90,000, that's our number? And the 231,204 is our number.
Per chip, right.
So we have about $300,000 in home that we can think about how we want to use in terms of creativity. And then the CDBG, and this is where really we just need to think about the paradigm. We're going into our 5-year master plan. I think this is the right time to think about the paradigm we want to bring forward with this CDBG money. Right now, we spend $339,000 on demolition. We used to spend more, and we had to bring that down. The regulations changed, is that right?
For slum and blight, yes.
Okay, so now we can, we spend $339,000 on demolition. Rehab of housing, we spend $1 million. And of that, the vast majority of it is emergency home repair program. So this would be a paradigm shift. Right now, we spend $500,000 a year in repairing people's homes. Low, moderate income people apply. When they don't have anywhere to turn, and they come to us, and we fund that at a high level. So this would be, in terms of paradigm, if we moved our demo somewhere else, I don't think we're going to get an argument from anyone that we need to do less demolition. I think we just need to figure out where that money's going to come from, if not here. But in terms of emergency home repair, we're spending $500,000 just on that. Now, the project delivery for under CDBG rehab of housing, that $500,000, what is that for?
That's associated to soft costs. We have to do environmental reviews for every one of these, so that covers the staff to conduct those reports, and also our inspections. Every house has at least 2 to 3 inspections, and so this is all the staff costs associated with carrying it out.
So in order to spend $500,000 on emergency home repair, we have to spend $500,000 to make sure that this is a good place to spend the money, is that right?
Right, and CDBG has the minimum, I don't have it in front of me right now, but a minimum of that has to go to admin, which would be considered, project delivery and admin can be moved around, but we have minimums on that.
So of the $2 million for CDBG, what is the requirement for admin? Do you know?
I need to look that up, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. But you can move it around between categories, but there is, of the $2 million, there's some that's required to be for administrative costs.
Correct.
And that could be, what, 10, 15%, do you guess, or?
I'm looking it up. No, CDBG is 37%. Let me double check that that's what we've been doing historically. Let me see, I have it in my notes.
This is one of the issues that this commission's talked about repeatedly, is amount of staff dollars.
20%, sorry, 37 is the gross admin that we use for CDBG, ESG, and home. So 20% minimum, or maximum is, hold on.
20% maximum, or?
I need to look, no, because home is 10%, ESG is 7.5, and CD is 20% minimums
Okay.
we have to use, which is the 37.
So of the $2 million for CDBG, a 20% minimum on administrative is a $400,000 number, is that right? That's minimum. So if we take that, because, and that comes back to, this is the most heavily regulated number you'll ever beat in your life, but that's, so we have 1.6 million then, if I'm doing the math right, that we could actually spend on something. And what we want to spend it on. Currently, we spend about $1 million, we spend about half of our money on rehabilitation of housing. So that is, right now, we're going to low mod income places. People reach out and need some kind of repair, roof repair. Give me some examples of the kind of repairs you do.
We have a lot of sewer repairs. We have a lot of failing sewers in our community because our housing stock is so old. So roofs right now with the rain, and I believe foundations.
Can you speak directly into the mic for the people on the air?
Foundations used to be on our list. I'm not sure if we're still doing that because those are so cost prohibitive. Are we taking that out?
We don't do foundations anymore, and sewer failures, sometimes we will run into a property that is on a septic tank. And so that adds to our cost, because when we see that opportunity to put that property on the city sewer and take them off of the septic tank, we think that's a good use of the dollars. I'll give you an example of why that's important. Several years ago, we had a resident that had a failed sewer, and we were literally dumping 13,000 gallons a month of untreated sewage into the water table. And our staff attorney, who's the EPA expert, said, we have to fix that. And so we spent a considerable amount of dollars taking that property off of a septic tank and adding them to a sewer. And we basically had to push the waste uphill. So each one of these projects have different dimensions, and a lot of times the staff really don't know what they're getting into until they get there. Lead-based paint is another concern of the older parts of our community. We don't get to walk away from a property that has lead-based paint because we don't have the money to address it. If we see it, we can't walk away from it. So each property is different, each situation is a little different.
So are you saying we can't walk away from it? If a resident comes and says, I have lead-based paint that's poisoning my children, are we required by law to abate that?
We are required to do an assessment to determine the level of exposure, if you will, and if it can be reasonably abated. Another policy that the department has initiated is, if a property is in such bad shape that it is going to cost more to repair or rehab that property than the assessed valuation of that property, we take a step back and say, do we really want to do this? Because we're really throwing good money after bad.
So I'm just trying to get an idea on the buckets of where we're spending money in CDBG right now. Home and ESG are not really, well, home we can be creative in terms of where we invest in the home dollars, but they have to be in homes, and ESG has to be in home, largely homeless assistance. So we spend money on demo, we spend money on housing repair, and we spend money on public services, and we spend money on administration.
Yes.
Now, the CDBG Section 108 repayments, what are those? That's $355,000 a year.
The 108 repayment has to do with our support of the Hilton Garden Hotel.
Okay. And that money has been spent and is obligated, is that right?
I believe we have an annual payment toward the support of that hotel each year.
So if we're going to take $335,000 that was already been committed, then we probably can't spend that again. But right now, we're spending money on administration, public services, housing rehabilitation, and demolition, and repayment on that loan, right?
Yes, sir.
So I think this gets us to the idea as we look at our 5-year plan of how we want to spend this money. Do we want to shift money? Which money do we want to shift? Public services, housing rehab, demolition. Those are the three really we can deal with. And we can adjust the administration, though there's a minimum requirement. So we have $400,000 set aside for admin and $355,000 set aside for repayment on the loan. That leaves us about $1.3 million, $1.2 million that we can think about what we want to do with it. And most of that right now we spend on housing rehab. Does that make sense? I mean, that's just the big picture. That's what we're doing with the money currently. So now I think we have the conversation, whether it's for this year or whether it's for the 5-year plan, if we want to change paradigms in terms of how we spend our CDBG money. This is the conversation I'm hoping to have tonight in terms of what direction we aspire to go and then set out the roadmap on how to get there. Does that make sense? Commissioner Murguia.
It looks like you have another commissioner. I'm going to wait till all the commissioners that want to speak have spoken, and then I'll come back to me.
Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I received a lot of positive feedback for the rehabilitation part of the CDBG fund, and I get a lot of calls from people who say, you know, we were glad we were able to get our toilet fixed or XYZ, and so I'd like to see that stay in place. And I think that if we just move $500,000 somewhere else, we still don't get a big bang just for moving that over. If we shut down 2 or 3 things and move over $1 million, then maybe we get, you know, a better bang for our buck. But $500,000 is not a lot, and I think a lot of people look forward to that yearly in you know, remodeling their homes. And then I also wanted to ask, what are the criteria for applying for the rehabilitation homes? Because I somewhat know them, but I wanted to ask, what are they?
I can address that. You have to be at 60% area median income, which I didn't bring that chart. That's on our website for your family size. You have to own your home and be current on your taxes. Those
Okay.
are the main 3.
Okay, is there an age limit?
Of the household or the homeowner?
Yeah,
No.
okay, okay. Because I was told that in the past, and I would just, if that was a part of it, I wanted to question why it would be a certain age up versus just a homeowner or someone who represents one of the
Right. No,
red dots.
not that I know of.
Okay, all right, well, that's all I wanted to say. I do support the actual rehabilitation part of the CDBG, which I know a lot of people look forward to, even though it's a one-time thing. For people who have individual households, I think that's a good idea that they have that as an option.
Okay, Commissioner Murguia.
Thank you, Mayor. So that's a whole lot of detail, and I appreciate that, except I was really coming at it from a very much bigger perspective. Let me see if I can paint a picture. That might be a whole lot easier for people to understand. So what I'm saying is that traditionally, economic development takes place in higher income neighborhoods. I think we all can agree with that, okay? So when we want economic development to occur in lower income areas, we have to work twice as hard and we have to get creative about the way we finance that, okay? So let me make up an example. Let's say there is an area in downtown Kansas City, Kansas, where we want to build a grocery store.
That would be awesome.
Yes. There, that's something we can all be familiar with. We want to build a grocery store. And around that grocery store currently, there is I'm just saying, I'm not saying there is, I'm saying there might be a significant amount of blight, or maybe housing in need of repair, or maybe there's something that needs to be torn down, or maybe there's a homeless shelter that needs to be rehabbed. Whatever the deal is, and it's in a 4-block area. All I'm saying is that we get strategic and about how we use these dollars, and that they complement a potential fair market development like a grocery store. So you build the grocery store. I know this for a fact because I have built a grocery store as the executive director of Vonda. So I know I had to go out and raise $1.5 million in charitable dollars. So one of the ways to close that funding gap might be for somebody who's interested in building a grocery store to use CDBG money to close that gap. Another option might be in the same exact area, whether you build a new maybe YMCA, or you rehab and fix up an existing John F. Kennedy or JFK building. You could utilize some of these dollars to do that. And I think the level of creativity that Commissioner Markley is speaking about is that there are ways to be able to provide services, for example, out of the JFK Center. I'm just using it as an example, that would make that facility eligible for these dollars, the services that are provided there. I'm not saying this amount of money is significant and is going to change the world, but it is one more piece of a bigger puzzle and having a greater impact in an area of Wyandotte County that is extremely challenged. That's all I'm saying. And as far as administration, we spend $900 and some thousand on the administration of these funds. I think we could do better than that. That's all I'll say in regard to that.
So in terms of moving this forward, one of the key things that I think this commission needs to decide is, and we're the ones that make this decision. We set this budget and we give the marching orders to the department in terms of how they spend it. So we need to decide, based on the parameters given to us, which are complicated. That doesn't mean we can't be creative and use them to leverage other monies. Is we have a few fixed costs up here that we can't touch. So what's hard for me usually is to drill down into what is the money we do have the choice on, because that's really the money we need to be talking about. We need to talk about how much money up here. We see a $2.7 million line item, $2.8 million, and we think, oh, we have $2.8 million to work with. Well, once you take out home and ESG, and you take out administrative costs and the loan payment that's already committed, we're down to about $1.2 million, maybe $1.5 million in money that we have flexibility to spend. Then we need to decide with that money, what do we want to, we could set that money aside for economic development and specify that it need to be in a larger economic development project, right? Or we could say we want to continue to do demolition, public services, and housing rehabilitation, or some variation therein, right? So we could adjust the numbers, because the amount of money we're doing for rehabilitation of housing, which is $1 million right now, we could say we want to cut that in half and do half that much, right? And then allocate the other money. Or we could cut it out altogether and say we're not doing housing rehabilitation anymore, and that full $1 million could go towards economic development. We could say with the demolition the same thing. We're behind in demolition right now, and we're talking about homes that have been, I mean, we all drive by homes that have been burned out or that need to come down, because a house without a family, a familyless house, starts to disintegrate immediately. And if we don't get in there within 2 years, it could be beyond repair. Where would we, if I believe our demolition money is being well spent, the question is though, is there another place we could do demo, or are we doing demolition that's not necessary? Right? I don't know the answer to that. Or do we just spend those demolition dollars in a strategic area? Which I would be great with. The question is, we have other areas that need demolition. Is there a way to pull money out of the other part of the general fund? Because I don't think the demolition money is money that we don't need. That's one of my issues. Because we had to do that already. We had to lower the amount of demolition out of this fund by regulation, and then we had to backfill it from the general fund because we had to keep doing it. So if we have $1 million or $1.5 million, the question is, what steps do we want to take in terms of prioritizing that? I've heard one commissioner say he thinks the housing rehabilitation is a good idea to continue. I think the demo's got to continue. I don't know where we'd get the money. The public services we haven't talked about with livable neighborhoods, the Willa Gill Center, Freedom School doing real work. Freedom School and doing real work, with that $150,000 were items we added in at the 11th hour last year in the budget. So livable neighborhoods and Willa Gill Multi-Service Center. How do we want to go about setting up a process to prioritize these in the community? I think that's our challenge. Commissioner Markley?
Thanks, Mayor. You keep talking about the home dollars and the housing rehabilitation dollars as though those are sort of sacrosanct, but I think for me there needs to be a mindset change, because I think those dollars can still be used more strategically than we're using them now, even if we have to use them on homes or we're going to use them for rehabilitation. Like Commissioner Murguia was saying, can we use them for rehabilitation in an area we're trying to redevelop, or are we going to use the demo dollars to demolish something in the area we're going to redevelop? So to me, I mean, I appreciate that you're trying to kind of drill down and say exactly how much money do we want to spend where, but I'm afraid before we even get to that, we need to have this mindset change where we say we want to take this whole program and say our goal for CDBG is going to be development, and how can we use the dollars in the way that they're allocated and in the way that we're required to by the regulations to meet that goal. So if we can make that mind shift, I think we're 99% of the way there. If we can make that mind shift and say we understand there are requirements and there are limitations on the money, but how can we take the money with its limitations and spend it still in the best way to meet that goal?
No, I totally understand that. I think that's right. Now the question is, if you take strategic planning, which is this way, and we have a scattershot map of how we're spending it. When we pull that money in, we're going to not be doing some things, right? If we said to someone who applies for a home rehab, we'd say, well, we're targeting this specific neighborhood this year, or this area this year. Your home's not within that area, so you would not be eligible for, because we would specify strategically, we'd still be doing housing rehab by what you're saying, but we would be narrowing it. The question then is, with demolition, we're doing demolition all over the place wherever it's needed. If we say we're spending our demolition dollars in a strategic area, we're making a decision not to do it in other places. So my question is, I don't disagree with leveraging this money. My question is, how do we prioritize, and I'm open for suggestions, and I really would like to get down the road on this tonight. How do we prioritize saying, we're not going to do it here, we're just going to do it here, and do we need to backfill that or just stop doing it? I think for me, that's the question. Commissioner Philbert?
Thanks for leading off with that, because that's kind of the direction I'm going. The bottom line is, as these two ladies have already said, is that we're going to have to take the heat from our individual constituency in our own areas if we're going to pinpoint an area to make as our project, our first project, okay? And so the big thing is now we just have to decide if we want to make that mindset, to make that shift, to find an area that we're going to work on. Will all of us commissioners be willing to take the heat to go ahead and jump out there on those skinny branches? Like Ms. Marquis is saying. I mean, that's the bottom line. Will we be willing to handle what it takes to explain to our people why we're doing this? And that's the bottom line. And then we just have to figure out what we're going to work on. And thank you.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you. I don't really have anything that directly follows up either of these last two comments, but in the last 3 budget cycles, I've made an observation that given how fast these dollars are disappearing, given the decrease in appropriation every year, it's my belief that if we believe these programs, these allocations of money into the community are important, we're going to have to find a way to fund it on our own, which means that ultimately we're going to have to find internal budget dollars to support these programs if we think that they are important. So I'm just going to remind all of us of my opinion that as we look forward years and years and we look toward our long-term income and expense projections, that we intentionally build these in. And then if by any stretch of the imagination the allocation goes up, we win because we've got a little bit of extra money in the pool. But I think we need to be very thoughtful and intentional about building these in. And I guess my question would be then, at this time, if we had additional general fund dollars, could some of the things that are being paid for through CDBG be shifted out? And in particular, I'm thinking about the administration. If we had general fund that would cover that, could that then release those dollars for the specific objectives of CDBG?
Yes.
Okay.
But you have to achieve those minimums. You have to already hit those minimums. So the 20%, you have to pay 20% out of CDBG for admin. That's
But we're paying more than that now, right?
correct. But
Correct.
if we just hit that 20% and then
Exactly.
have general fund pick up the
But
rest.
theoretically, we could free up some additional directed or targeted dollars.
Right, from general fund.
Okay,
We
thank
would
you.
love that.
Commissioner Walker.
Mayor, I'm more confused than when we started now.
Can you share your confusion directly into the microphone,
Hey,
sir?
thank you, Brian, for that. I kind of like the idea that we leverage dollars to do I realize that the Hilton Hotel, were we wanting to do it today, might not be built where it was built in 1995. But you can point to that and say the community was improved with these dollars. Now, I realize that you can't eliminate the individual circumstances, but some of these dollars should be used to make profound improvements in a community. I always, again, I go back to when there were lots of dollars, 20 million or more. And at the end of the day, at the end of the year, it was real hard to see where all that money went. And I'm sure it went into building sewers and rehabbing houses and some demolition and various things, but I don't know what the long-term survival rate of the homes were that we improved. Did when we rehabbed them, are they still out there, or did they eventually become abandoned or deteriorate in other ways, that sort of thing? So I'd like to explore this idea of leveraging significant improvements. I just would have to see where we could do that and benefit it. Obviously, with your proposal, if there is less dollars that we would need to make that happen, that would be one I think Commissioner Murguia was referencing. But there are probably others and other opportunities. Clearly, I think it's easy. I think the first district, part of the fourth district, are priority areas for these dollars.
Well, I think 1, 2, 3, 4 are all high priority areas.
Most of where we've spent dollars are in east of 635 for the most part, in our low to moderate income census tracts.
But we obviously can't spend it in all of the east 635 corridor continue if we're going to try to go down this other road. So, and I don't see us having general funds to make it up where we take the money out of, at least not in the short term. Thank you.
Commissioner Murguia.
Okay, so just a couple of other comments. I do like the level of detail. It's just hard to have a detailed conversation in this setting. It's difficult for me for some reason, sorry. Because you seem to be making more statements up here than a conversation. So this is what I would say. Mayor, I appreciate you saying, you're saying that if we decide to spend this money in a targeted area, then that means less money for another area. I'm not really proposing that. What I'm proposing is that simply we use at Wyandotte Economic Development. This is the deal. Though there aren't a lot of fair market deals that occur east of 635, there are deals that do occur east of 635. And I think what I'm trying to say is that we leverage those dollars. For example, there's not a grocery store in the northeast area, but it doesn't mean one won't come. It just means what is it going to take to get them here? And I don't even mean from a financial perspective. I mean when you're talking to the retailer and you're saying to them, what about this community is a reason you don't want to come here? And if they say not enough rooftops, or they say the blight, dilapidation, or the high crime, this is money that we could use to commit to that project to help encourage that developer, incent that developer to come to that area. Now, each area is going to be at a different level of development. It depends on where you're at, and it depends on what is coming your way. I will tell you, I have a great relationship with Greg Kindle, and just the number of times I've talked to him about different opportunities for Wyandotte County, in particular the urban core, the frustration has been, we've got to clean up this first, or we don't quite have enough money here, or crime's too high here. And that's why I'm saying stable development is driven by the fair market. So if Greg can bring us a stable fair market development, and we can work with that proposed development to improve an area where that development can get more comfortable being there, that's what we want to do. So I'm not saying by any means, let's earmark, sorry, Commissioner Markley, but let's earmark all this money for Highland Crest in Turner. No, I think that'd be ridiculous also. I think we have to look at where, however, Commissioner Markley might argue with that. But I think we need to target this money for where we have opportunities. And we do have opportunities east of 635, we do. But if we had this money sort of, I don't have another explanation for it, then I call them like a resource or a trick in your bag to be able to pull out when a deal comes in our direction. So hopefully that's easier to understand. I agree with Commissioner Walker. I deal with development all day long, so it's much easier for me to understand, especially in those challenged areas. This is a very difficult discussion if you don't do urban development on a day-to-day basis and see and hear about the struggles that developers have. So I want to just give you one more example, because I know it's not what anyone does here for a living. So if I would have been in charge of things 15 years ago when the Hilton Garden Inn was built in downtown Kansas City, Kansas, what I would have done to potentially ensure greater success of that development is I would have built 2 hotels and coupled them together. And I would have built a hotel across from KU Medical Center where you have a huge demand for a hotel. And I would have let that revenue from that deal offset the cost of a hotel in downtown Kansas City, Kansas, so that the long-term financial burden of supporting a downtown hotel didn't routinely fall on this government. So now the fair market is involved in sustaining that development over the long haul. Now, I wasn't here 15 years ago or whenever it happened, and it's easy to say that now. But I think there's amazing potential. I'm going to go out on a limb and use my own district. There is amazing things going on in District 3, in particular in the KU Med, KU Hospital area. In my mind, there are ways to take that development and benefit Commissioner Maddox's district, one of the hardest places that we are developing. I think there are ways to make more viable deals pay for deals that are less viable. Now, I can't get into the details in an hour-long discussion, but I think I've worked long enough with our new administrator, Doug Bach, where I think he knows where I'm headed, and I think he's very bright when it comes to community development, and could all on his own, without us going through each and every line item, figure out ideas based on our strategic plan, Mayor, what you've exactly talked about, to be able to bring ideas forward on ways that we could restructure CDBG. My deal is this: I just don't think, as busy as Greg Kendall is, he's going to have the time to consider CDBG or home money if it isn't underneath his department. He moves too fast. Development happens too quickly. It's nothing against him. It's just the way development goes. So I'm stopping. That's my 2 cents.
All right. Commissioner Kane.
Are you sure you're stopping?
I'm stopping.
None of us were here as commissioners 15 years ago. When I got here 9 years ago, we had plenty of money. And then the slider, or the M&E tax was taken from us, and then the economy went in the tank. So I'd imagine 15 years ago, everybody was thinking the world was perfect, and it's not. And I am a little bit confused now this money stuff goes. But what I'm not confused about it is maybe 1 year we focus on one area and say, this is what we want to do this year. And then next year we revisit it to see what our results are. You know, and you can't, if you don't do something, or if you don't make an effort, you don't know the changes that you can make. But I think by leveraging the money, we can get more done, and then in a year's time, we'll have some sort of results where Kendall and those guys can say, hey, you know what, that worked really well, now we've got these guys looking at the area. So if we just pool it together for a year, and then revisit it next year prior to the budget, because I think it makes better business sense to try something now, especially because things are on the upswing. People are looking at us like we're a place that they want to grow, and I think it's time to grow right here, and then say, okay, we did this, it worked this year, or if it didn't work, then we'll go back to what the old way was. But right now, this way isn't working. I think we need to try something different.
Well, and I agree with that, Commissioner Kane. I think what I would suggest, though, is I don't think we can do a 1 year. I think we have to do a full 5-year block. I think we have to do a 5-year strategic plan. And we need to, and we're going to need to step out on that limb, because if we stop doing the home emergency repair program, a lot of it's a very staff-intensive program in terms of the inspections and the assessment. If we shifted that money and lost those employees for 1 year, we wouldn't be able to go back and recover it. You know, if you only did one project that was $1 million, it wouldn't take as much staff time to vet as if you do many projects that are smaller dollars. So if we did a 5-year plan and we wanted to realign these line items and go down a road, the next 5 years is the way to do it. And then we commit to it for 5 years. Just, you know, we have stuff committed by previous commissions for us all the time, right? And so that we live with. So I think if we have a strategic plan and we say we want to leverage these CDBG dollars differently for the next 5 years, that's how we're going to do it, then I think we have 1 more year left in this current plan, and we need to spend every intentional minute developing how we want to do it, so it's not let's go try this, but it's actually a well thought out plan that we can push forward, and then we can make a decision as a commission to step out on this, the skinny branches, I believe is how you describe them, Commissioner Philbrook. But I think that would be the way to go in terms of and spending the time to say, okay, if we do demolition, it's going to be strategic. So the other demolition that we need has to wait or has to come from somewhere else. So that would be one. If we're going to not do public services at all, we're going to need to have a long conversation about that, because I think we could do some. I don't want to just give up feeding the homeless for 5 years, or that money needs to come from somewhere else. So we just need to decide where we're gonna, how we're gonna do it. I don't have any trouble, though, changing the paradigm in terms of how we're gonna do it. The question is, how do we want to set up, because we have this conversation every year. So let's have a plan.
I guess I'm not done, Commissioner.
Okay. You called it. Let's spend the next few minutes coming up with our plan for the next year in terms of process for making this decision and a recommendation.
Yeah, I don't need to talk now, thank you.
So how do we want to move this forward? Do we want to have a committee? Do we want to have a team? Do we want to have a group working on this? Who is it that wants to take the lead?
I think Angela and Commissioner McKiernan and Commissioner McGee would be fine individuals to work on.
I knew that was going to happen.
Well, because you guys, McKiernan and Markley make a good team, and Ann, you seem to have more knowledge about it than a lot of us, so that's my motion, that they're a team.
Well, and I also think Commissioner Maddox, we need to hear from Commissioner Maddox and Commissioner Townsend, because their two districts are heavily impacted by this. And
Okay, 5-man team.
I think we can have a 5-person team, can we not?
Can we with,
I think that's the max.
okay.
I think 5's the limit. But that would include the 5 commissioners whose districts are directly impacted by this. Right?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner Townsend.
this part of the good part and the bad part of being at home by this, I'm trying not to step over anybody. I did want to make a couple of comments and ask a couple of questions. I get that we are trying to make the most impact with the dollars that we have. I wanted to know what was the amount of money. This may have been said already, but I couldn't see the screen. What was the amount of money spent on the CDBG funds out of that bucket for the home improvement program last year?
$1 million.
$1 million.
Yes.
And the total we have was how much?
Say again.
Of the
We have 2.7 million, and
Okay.
2 million of that is CDBG. Of the CDBG, half of it is spent on home repair. $1 million
Okay.
of the $2 million is spent on home repair.
Okay. I guess the thing that I wanted to say is we were talking about, good points were made by Commissioner Murguia and Commissioner Kane and Markley about trying to leverage this. But the thing that I want to say is that if you are the person living under the roof that needs a repair, or the one whose home needs a sewer repair, that is economic development for you. So I would hate to see that we spend no money on that type of thing. I guess my thought would be, how much do we spend, and try to move in this impact way. But to those citizens who need a roof, need some type of emergency repair, that is economic development for them. And especially if we're going to concentrate on trying to develop whole areas east of 635. These are blight modification procedures. So I just wanted to make mention of that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll go to Commissioner Maddox. Commissioner Maddox?
Thank you. And I didn't mean to go backwards either or be redundant, but I just wanted to ask how much of those rehabilitation funds are used yearly? Are all the funds used every year, or is there money that left over at the end of the year?
All funds are generally exhausted.
Huh?
All the funds are generally exhausted. We very rarely have any carryover. I'd have to get with our fiscal person to confirm that for you.
Okay, can you give me those results? And then I'd also like to ask again for more clarification, and then also inquire if there's a possibility for modification. I heard that if you spend $500,000 on home repair, it becomes $1 million because of for what reason?
I'm not sure if I'm tracking with your question, Commissioner.
Well, I think I can answer that. Up there on the slide, it says emergency home repair 500,000, project delivery 500,000. That it takes $500,000 worth of staff time in terms of multiple inspections and vetting of each project to make sure it can go through. So for every dollar we spend on home repair, it takes $1 to make sure this is a legitimate project. Because you can't have someone call and say, I need $5,000, and you cut them a check. The staff goes out to the house, they inspect it, they find out if there's asbestos, if there's lead paint, if there's the valuation of the home. There's a very comprehensive assessment that has to be done that we do. And then we say, I mean, we might do a $5,000 repair, but we might spend $5,000 in staff time making sure that that's money well spent.
So my question with that is that HUD regulations, or is that something we put in place here? I know they give us the option to maximize 15% or 10%, but I've got a question. Spending $500,000 on home repairs and spending another $500,000 just to spend it. I mean, that's that. I understand that.
That's a valid question.
Well, I don't know if it's a, quote, HUD requirement we can check. We monitor to make sure that the project is being done with up to code standards, or whatever the regulations are. That's part of the monitoring process. And so I'll check and see if we're not required to monitor properties when we're doing a project, then that will be the answer to your question. I don't know exactly if it's, quote, a requirement, Commissioner. I suspect it probably is, but we can check that with the regional folks from HUD and get back with you.
Right. Well, thank you. I just think that, I'll just be honest and say I think that's ridiculous that it would take $500,000 to spend that amount, and I just wanted to say that.
All right, so we have a group of willing and enthusiastic volunteers who are going to work on the next 5-year plan. McKiernan, is that your willingness or your enthusiasm fading?
I just want to go on record and say I did my best to avoid eye contact tonight, and it didn't work. So, but I am a willing volunteer.
That's good enough. Willing is good enough at this point. So we have at least 5 willing volunteers who are going to work on a strategic plan. I think that's a great way to move forward. Now, we can kind of draw a line here. We're done with that portion of the conversation, kind of the big picture conversation. The next level of conversation I want to have is we have some unallocated money that's reappropriated. And can you talk to us about how this money comes about and what the options are for using it? And is there any?
I cannot speak to that tonight. I'd have to get with fiscal.
Well, I can take a high-level stab at it. Last year, the commission approved certain projects with an appropriation. And if the project did not get underway, then that appropriation gets carried over, and we come back to the governing body and say, you can now reappropriate these dollars. So we have a couple of appropriations that will be coming back for your decision on what you want staff to do with them.
Do you know the dollar amounts on those this year?
Not off the top of my head, no, sir.
Okay. I'd like to have, sooner than later, a memo sent out to the commission to let us know what the reappropriation from 2013 is that we will be deciding on, so we have some time to think about it before a meeting, so we can think about what we've talked about in the context of what we've talked about tonight. I mean, if there's $10,000, it'll be a short conversation. If
it's definitely more than 10.
I anticipate it is. So if it's a couple $100,000, then we need to talk about how we want to allocate those dollars. Do we want to put them back in these same buckets that we're currently doing, or do we want to set it aside for something else, knowing that it has to fit on this magic grid that we've been given tonight? But I would like to have that amount of money. It seems like that comes back to us in July, and we have to turn around and vote on that in a couple weeks. So if there's any way to get that before the end of this month in the hands of the commissioners, so we can at least see the amount and see see it in relationship to this chart. So for instance, I'll bet the whole Section 108 repayment is paid in full. I'll bet there's not a reappropriation from that line item.
No.
So where did the reappropriation come from? In which of these grant buckets? So that we can think about how we want to reassign them. And it might be that this group of 5 zealots could get together even to talk about that money. Well, you know, we're just running out of adjectives for your enthusiasm. So yes, if you could even take a look at that money, so we can start being strategic. And just because we have a year before the new program comes into place doesn't mean we can't be strategic now. But maybe we just need to be thinking long term. All right, so we don't know about the reappropriation now, and we can have that by the end of this month?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Walker.
If I was going to comment, it seems that we had a couple of potential recipients that were, as I recall, on some list as approved projects but didn't get any allocation, and that's what I'm recalling from our earlier public meeting. Is that not the case?
Commissioner Walker, you are accurate. I will tell you, I think I was just talking to Commissioner McKiernan about that. Money was for the Black Chamber and for Argentine Betterment Corporation, which is not to be confused with ONDA. So there were 2 organizations that were slated to receive funding, and they did not. And so the money just sat there, Mayor, and it didn't go anywhere. And so there's been several conversations with myself, Commissioner McKiernan, and Commissioner Markley in regard to this funding. I feel particularly bad about these 2 organizations because I've had several conversations with Crystal Watkins, who's in charge of the Black Chamber, and she did everything that she was directed to do in order to get these funds, and she was told she'd get funding and she didn't. So I think most importantly to me is that we make good on what we say we're going to do for people.
Well, I would hope that if you could give us a report by the end of the year in terms of what monies have and haven't been spent, what's ready for reallocation, and why that money is available, I think that would get to the end of this month.
End of the month.
Well, I meant into the month. I'm losing my mind. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, I know what you meant.
Administrator Bach.
I would also add, probably in conjunction with those, when we did our public hearing, there were a number of items that you went through on your list that were potential for CD funding, which I think after evaluation, there's a value of, that was like a $6 million list. A couple of million from that list would be eligible under CD. So I would assume with that, we'll get it out and let you all, the committee, evaluate those at the same time and see whether they want to factor in. Our job was to determine whether or not they're able to spend with it. We've done that, so it factors in with this evaluation process.
All right. Any other questions for CDBG? We actually have a plan, which I'm pretty excited about because we talk about it a lot. So I'm glad to have a plan. We have a plan to make a plan. That's right. That's the best kind of plan. We've assigned it to a committee. And I trust it will come back. So I appreciate the willingness. And we have now, if there are no further questions for tonight, we're going to go ahead and take a break. We are slated for a 7 o'clock. That gives us about a 20-minute recess before the 7 o'clock meeting, and it will give the clerk time to conclude recording this meeting and turn it around so we can be ready for the next one. So this special session is adjourned.